Hello, and welcome to the podcast where I and one or more guests talk about movies, plays, and similar media. Today's guest is Lizzie Northey.
Hello.
And today we will be discussing Pixar's relatively new movie, Inside Out. So, to start off, what were your thoughts on it initially?
I really liked this movie. I thought it was a lot different than Pixar's other movies. I thought it was really interesting to see. It had a really interesting perspective on shit.
Yeah, it really did, though. I mean, it sounds silly, but...
Well, yeah. No, it like, most, like, Pixar movies are just, like, based on just silly characters, just, like, animals or, like, animals or, like, automobiles or planes or stuff like that. But this one is, like, it had, like, it had a more deeper meaning than just, like, these are cool things that kids like. This is what's going on in your head. These are the emotions you're feeling. It had a broader audience, too, I think. Because, like, it was adorable, such as most Pixar kids movies, but also it had a lot of adult themes to it, when you think about it.
Well, yeah, and I remember reading before I even saw the movie that it was actually a really, really accurate depiction of what depression looks like psychologically. And then as I was watching, so that was mainly the perspective I was taking when I was watching the movie, is I was just watching it and thinking, okay, so this is what depression actually looks like. This is interesting to see how it corresponds to, how things could be interpreted in one's head, and then the outward response as well with the scenes with just Riley. And so it was just very interesting from that perspective.
It's really interesting to think about it that way, just because it kind of gives an actual depiction of the emotions that are going on in someone's head when they're depressed or going through a certain phase in their life, or when they're happy or sad. And I think that was definitely something the movie portrayed really well, especially in the phase when she was scared and thinking about running away, and like how the emotions like literally had control over her, like the fear and the anger and the disgust and everything, because that's what someone actually goes through. And I think having the actual literal depiction of that is what made the movie so strong in that sense, and how it made it more visual to children who might experience that, and they can think, oh, this is just what's going on in my brain. And so maybe it could possibly help them out in the future, something like that, possibly.
Yeah, because something I thought was interesting about it is that when you get down to it, the entire plot was somewhat caused by trying to keep sadness from interfering and getting involved, and in the end that ends up with both of them getting lost, and in the very end, of course, spoilers, the only thing that can fix the situation is sadness. And I just thought that was really interesting, because I know a lot of people think depression is sadness, especially colloquially. You hear depression used as like a, more fancy term for sadness all the time. And when really that's not the reality at all. And I just thought it was really interesting to see that, because I think a lot of it would be just trying to avoid sadness, and how in the end that's really the only thing that can help. I think that's definitely an important message to get out there, and good job for Pixar making it entertaining to actually learn that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that too. I think it's really a good thing that they put it out there, like, about emotions, just because they are something that shouldn't be suppressed, because that's the lesson that Riley learned, as in when she tried to stop feeling sadness, then she just got confused, and when she really needed to feel her sadness for a bit to realize, to kind of like reflect. And so we shouldn't, like, it was a very good, like, message about, like, the movie and how we need to feel emotions. And then I also liked how at the end they brought in the mixed emotions more.
Yeah. That was a really interesting scene, because I'm trying to remember what I thought when I first saw that. It was really interesting just to see how something could have multiple perspectives taken on it from a psychological, from that point of view. And I just thought the way they portrayed that was really good. And on the topic of portrayal, something I realized is that anthropomorphic personifications of things are actually a really good way to explain stuff. Like, the one I'm mostly familiar with is national personifications, like you see in Poland Ball, for example,
Oh,
and
Poland Ball.
how, yeah, and how a lot of them are just silly jokes, but but if you wanted to, you could use them as actually a really effective tool to teach people about international relations and the motivations behind why countries do certain things, and it really humanizes and also, I don't want to say simplifies, but makes complex topics easier to understand. And I never really would have thought Poland Ball and Inside Out were really in the same vein, but in a way they kind of are, because they both do the same thing of taking something that is very complex, like politics or in this case emotions, and then putting it in the context of, an actual person with thoughts and feelings of their own doing things, and it just makes a lot more sense when you put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. I definitely noticed it did make things a lot simpler to understand because a lot of people who are going to be watching Inside Out or possibly reading Poland Ball, well, especially Inside Out with this example, they might be confused themselves. And so when they see this, it's like, oh, maybe my problems are a little bit more simple. Or maybe the example of Poland Ball, it's Poland Ball is even educational, really, because you're
Yeah.
learning a bit. Because like through my readings of it, I've learned a lot more about some international relations within a humorous way. And so even though this isn't about Poland Ball, I definitely think that yeah, using the anthropomorphic representations of things is definitely a good way, and well, it's a good form of education, definitely, just because it's well, especially in the movies and the media, just because so many people are watching them, and it's very important to get out certain messages, and people aren't going to like listen if it's just a bunch of facts, which is unfortunate, but this is definitely a good way of portraying that message.
Yeah, exactly. A documentary about emotions presented, as a documentary with the exact same content and facts in it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting, wouldn't have been nearly as entertaining. Because something else that movie got really well was just the humor as well. I think one of my favorite jokes in that would have to be when they're on the train and someone knocks over the boxes of facts and opinions. And they're like, "Oh no, I can't tell these facts from these opinions." Oh, that's fine. Just mix them up. It's fine.
Yeah, that was a clever joke in there. I remember that one. The humor in that movie was definitely more well as in all of Pixar movies. They do include a lot of adult humor in them, which I've noticed in several of the movies. But in this movie in particular, it had a lot of more. It did have a lot of humor like that that would definitely go over kids' heads. But like the adults watching would be like, "Oh, that's clever writing there. That's." And I guess that's sort of like Pixar pandering to a wider audience because they know the parents are going to go with the kids. So might as well make it entertaining for everyone.
Yeah, it's definitely good to appeal to a wide audience. I think. I mean, I suppose just from the cold hard business perspective,
Mhm.
you're gonna drag in more bigger audience, make more money, yada yada yada. But I mean, even from an artistic perspective, I feel like the more people your art can reach out to, the more effective it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that too, but especially because this movie has such an important message, I'm glad that it was able to get to a to a really wide audience. It knows that it was so successful just because it has all the good messages about dealing with emotions and explaining them in a very simple way. And since so many people watched it, because of that, more people were able to just it has more opportunity to affect different people because I've noticed this a lot with blockbusters today is that the blockbusters are just there as a marketing tool to get more money. And this one, even though maybe just because it was Disney Pixar animated movie, it's going to do that, but the writers made sure that this is a piece of art and it has a good message and it's going to be explained in a really easy to understand way that people are going to want to watch again, want to learn more about, and want to understand more.
Yeah, your point about blockbusters being designed just to make money was actually reminded me of a conversation I had with someone who's minoring in film studies, I believe, who was talking about these idea of tentpole movies. Have you heard of them?
No, I haven't. I feel like I've heard the term before, though.
Okay, yeah. Well, the general idea, as I understand it, is that the studios make all these not very impressive, but very big money makers. Safe concepts that are going to make a lot of money, and then that way they have enough money to put more effort into more artistic or well, I don't want to say that because that implies art films, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
More movies with more meat to them, if you will.
Yes.
So I think that's an interesting way of looking at those movies, and it's interesting that studios do that.
Yeah. Actually, I do remember this. This was actually in my reading for my film history class last week. And it was interesting to see how, like, studios would make those, just to, like, hold up the studio so they could make, they made the point that studios would make those movies just so that some other studios could make more artistic movies, like, later. But I think it was interesting how Disney was able to incorporate both of them in this one.
Oh, yeah. Disney actually seems, well, I'm not sure about Disney in general. I would have to think a lot more about their movies in particular than I can think of at this exact moment. But I know Pixar seems to take that route pretty routinely, actually, because I know a lot of their movies maybe don't deal with as heavy topics as this one, but they definitely feel real. They have the real sort of human element to them.
Oh, definitely. I think Pixar, that's why Pixar is so successful as compared to, like, some of the other, like, Disney animated features. Because just the movie that comes to mind most often is The Incredibles. Is because even though it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, it deals with a lot of, like, very adult and very human situations that a lot of people go through, as in opposed to, like, the family situation, in opposed to how people act, like, through different, like, ages, and how the whole family, like, goes through all of, like, everything they go through. And just, I can't remember the specifics of that movie, but I know it had a lot to do with it had a lot more deeper meaning than just, oh, this is a fun superhero movie where you get to see Mr. Incredible do really cool things. And I think that's kind of something important about Pixar, too, is just because even though in general Disney has this big platform that it's a very big moneymaker, it makes a lot of blockbusters, it's a very big company, but I think Pixar, along with it, is definitely trying to bring a deeper meaning and a bigger understanding to a lot of the stuff it creates.
Yeah, with The Incredibles, it actually I remember a theme around the middle of the movie, I think, was how Mr. Incredible, his biggest fear is that he thinks his wife and kids might be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's definitely a very interesting theme to bring into what is technically a kids movie. You know, and Pixar does that sort of thing a lot, and Inside Out is probably the latest iteration of that, and I'm not willing to say it's the best one yet, but I really liked it personally.
I loved it too. But I think, yeah, I definitely get that. I think, especially maybe in the case of The Incredibles too, with his biggest fear being his family, like, you think of, like, a superhero like that being more fearless, but because the fact that he had that fear is definitely a choice by Pixar to have, like, more character development, which I also thought was very good in Inside Out too, because the characters had a lot more depth. Like, even, like, the emotions that were being portrayed, that were only supposed to be like, oh, there's joy, there's joy, there's sadness, and there's anger. But each of those characters had development and different characteristics in itself. Like, Joy, at times, she was also confused. She wasn't always happy. And Sadness had some moments where she was less sad, more understanding. And, like, all the characters, they were very, like, they had a lot of good development to them, which I thought was very interesting.
That is a really good point, because I think it would be very tempting if one were to make a movie about that, where, like, the main characters were specifically emotions. I think it'd be very easy to fall into the trap of just ending up reducing them to stereotypes, where they just end up being that emotion constantly, nothing else. And like you said, it's really good that Pixar managed to avoid that.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think at the end, that sort of development really played into the end message of the mixed emotions that it had, because I think, like, a big point of the movie was it's okay to have mixed emotions, it's okay to have, like, a gray area, maybe going along with that facts and opinions jokes too. It was definitely, like, a appraisal of, like, being able to, like, feel different emotions at the same time. So I think maybe portraying the emotion characters that way definitely enhanced their point that they're trying to make.
Oh, wow, I hadn't thought of it from that angle, but yes, I think you're definitely right about that. I actually saw, not too long ago, a chart someone made that showed how each of the different emotions would combine, and it was really cool. I'd show it, but this is an audio format, so not really going to happen, but, you know, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. So. That would be something very cool. Also, just another point I kind of wanted to bring up, as just along the lines of development. There was film student somewhere, I don't know where, but they made a video that was the development of Riley, and it was her without the emotions in her head. And the story of just Riley, it developed really well, and like you could like see the emotions on her face, and it just played out. It played out very well, and I just thought that was very interesting too, and how a lot of the movie was definitely development focused, like with the emotions and in Riley. And I thought that it was really interesting to see Riley is going through it without the emotions behind it, because you could definitely see that's what was going on in her face, but it's also interesting to see it that literally explained out with the actions of the emotions in her head.
I'll have to see. I'll have to see that because, at least, at least from my experience, I was a lot more focused on the emotions than Riley. So I probably missed a lot of really cool stuff they did there. And what you said about it being development focused, I think is probably one of the best things about the movie, because in the end, the characters are, I would say, what makes the movie, and you can't have good characters without good development. So it's really a good thing that they managed to make that a central focus.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think a good characteristic of like any good movie is having good development, because, well, actually, I can maybe get into some development stuff here. I recently saw The Revenant, and I thought it was a good movie, but I wasn't a fan of it just because there was very little character development. It was very more story driven, and so maybe that opposed to a movie sort of like Birdman, which is all about character development. And I think that just a good characteristic of a great movie is just having a good character development, in like any media, really, because it's more pleasing to follow the characters rather than just kind of like a story, because the characters, as they move on, it kind of like plays with your emotions and the audience, and you just like you have a sense where you feel for the character more, and it just makes it more enjoyable to watch, I think.
It's actually something I've noticed is that a lot of the stuff I really like is really, really focused on characters, and then the plot line is, I don't want to say bad, because it's not bad, but it's not, particularly innovative or original. It's a relatively basic plot line with really, really good characters put into it, and I know personally that's what I like best, and I definitely think that's not a completely unreasonable strategy to take when writing, well, movies, books, whatever in general, because it does work so well, and ultimately the characters can save a bad story more than a good story can save bad characters, I think.
I think so too. That's something that's very true. I think definitely, and if if a story's bad, there's no bouncing back from it. But if like your characters are good enough to like bounce back from a bad story, then it can definitely keep like a movie going or a TV show going. I've noticed that a lot too about maybe some sitcoms I've watched, just because the storylines are very simplistic. Like say The Office, for example, it's just a boring office, but because you have those enhanced characters that make the show, they really do make the show. And I think that's something that happened with Inside Out, because all it is a girl who's moving from Minnesota to San Francisco. And it's just her being sad about it, which could easily just be made into a short film, which would be her without the emotions. But I think having those vivid characteristics of all of the emotions definitely made it a movie worth watching.
It definitely made it a much stronger movie. And as it turns out, we're running out of time. We've only got, we've got less than a minute left.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've been talking for quite a while. So, I'm going to go and say thank you for listening, and see you next time.
All right, see you later.